Portfolio management is often discussed as if there were a single optimal formula, a perfect mix of assets that works for everyone, if only it is calculated correctly. This idea is comforting, but it is false. The way a portfolio should be managed depends less on markets and more on life. Income stability, time horizon responsibilities, emotional tolerance for risk, and the ability to recover from mistakes all change as a person moves through different stages. A portfolio that is appropriate at 25 can be dangerous at 55, and one that feels safe at 60 would be deeply inefficient at 30. Understanding portfolio management across life stages is about aligning capital with reality, not chasing theoretical efficiency. The biggest mistake investors make is treating age as the only variable. Age matters, but it is a proxy, not a rule. What truly matters is human capital versus financial capital. Early in life, most wealth resides in future earning power. Later in life, that earning power declines, while financial assets must carry more responsibility. Portfolio management is the gradual transfer of dependence from human capital to financial capital, and every major decision should be evaluated through that lens. In the early stage of life, typically the 20s and early 30s, the dominant asset is time. Mistakes are survivable. Income tends to grow. There is flexibility to recover from volatility. The primary goal of a portfolio at this stage is not stability. It is growth and habit formation. Contributing regularly, learning to tolerate market fluctuations, and avoiding catastrophic errors matter far more than fine-tuning asset allocation. Over-conservatism at this stage is a silent risk. It feels prudent, but it permanently sacrifices compounding that can never be reclaimed. As investors move into midlife, often the late 30s through 50s, the portfolio enters a more complex phase. Income may be higher, but responsibilities expand. Mortgages, children career risk, and lifestyle commitments increase the cost of mistakes. Time is still an ally, but it is no longer infinite. Portfolio management here becomes a balancing act between continued growth and emerging risk control. The goal shifts from pure accumulation to resilient accumulation. Diversification, rebalancing, and risk management begin to matter more, not because markets are changing, but because life is. One of the most dangerous transitions happens when investors fail to update their portfolio as life changes. Strategies that worked when income was rising and expenses were flexible can become fragile when obligations are fixed. Many investors remain aggressively positioned, not because it is appropriate, but because changing feels like admitting something has been lost. Portfolio management at this stage requires emotional maturity, the ability to reduce risk, not out of fear, but out of responsibility. Approaching retirement introduces a different challenge altogether. The portfolio is no longer just growing, it is preparing to support life. Sequence of returns, risk becomes real. Large losses early in retirement can permanently impair sustainability. Portfolio management here prioritizes liquidity, income reliability, and downside protection, while still maintaining enough growth to combat inflation and longevity risk. Becoming too conservative too quickly can be just as damaging as remaining too aggressive. The portfolio must now last, not just perform. In retirement itself, portfolio management shifts again. The investor becomes a spender as well as an owner. Cash flow management, withdrawal discipline, and emotional control during market downturns becomes central. Volatility feels different when there is no paycheck to offset it. The portfolio's job is no longer to impress, but to endure. Simplicity often outperforms sophistication at this stage, because complexity increases the risk of behavioral errors. Across all life stages, one principle remains constant: portfolios fail more often because of behavior than because of markets. Fear, greed, inertia, and identity-driven decisions do far more damage than imperfect asset allocation. The right portfolio for a given life stage is one you can stick with during stress, not one that looks optimal on paper. Another underappreciated aspect of life stage portfolio management is flexibility. Life rarely follows a clean timeline. Careers change, health intervenes, opportunities appear. The best portfolios are not rigid blueprints, but adaptable systems. This is why rules matter more than predictions. Rebalancing policies, contribution discipline, and risk limits create continuity, even when circumstances shift. Ultimately, managing a portfolio across life stages is not about de-risking with age in a mechanical way. It is about reassigning risk. Early in life, risk belongs primarily to markets. Later in life, risk belongs increasingly to the portfolio's ability to support living needs. Recognizing when and how that responsibility shifts is the core skill of long-term investing. As investors think about their own journey, the real challenge is not understanding that portfolios should change over time, but knowing how they should change, what risks to accept or avoid at each stage, and why many people make costly mistakes during these transitions. And that is exactly where we need to go next, by examining how to structure portfolios specifically for early career peak earning years, pre-retirement and retirement itself, with practical principles that translate life reality into investment decisions, which is where we will continue by looking at how portfolio structure should evolve in practice as life moves forward. Because theory only matters if it translates into behavior you can sustain. In the early career stage, the portfolio's primary job is growth and habit formation. Contributions matter more than optimization. A simple equity-heavy allocation makes sense because time absorbs volatility, and human capital provides a safety net. The real risks at this stage are not market drawdowns, but inconsistency, undersaving, and distraction. Complexity adds no value here. A portfolio that encourages regular investing, broad diversification, and emotional tolerance for ups and downs is already doing its job. As income rises and life enters the peak earning years, portfolio management becomes more deliberate. This is the stage where mistakes are costliest, not because losses cannot be recovered mathematically, but because obligations reduce flexibility. Growth remains important, but risk must now be shaped rather than ignored. Diversification across asset classes, regions, and strategies becomes meaningful. Rebalancing policies help prevent winners from quietly dominating risk. This is also the stage where investors should begin stress testing their portfolios against scenarios that would matter personally, not just financially, such as job loss or unexpected expenses. In the pre-retirement phase, usually the final decade before retirement, the portfolio's role shifts again. Growth is still necessary to fight inflation and longevity risk, but protection becomes equally important. This is where sequence of returns risk enters the picture. Large drawdowns just before withdrawals begin can permanently impair outcomes. Gradually increasing exposure to assets that provide stability, liquidity, and income helps buffer this risk. The transition should be gradual, not abrupt, allowing the portfolio to adapt without sacrificing compounding prematurely. Once retirement begins, portfolio management centers on sustainability. The investor is no longer waiting for markets to recover before using capital. Withdrawals are ongoing. Cash flow planning, withdrawal sequencing, and emotional resilience become core skills. The portfolio must now support life rather than future optionality. Simplicity matters. Fewer moving parts reduce the chance of mistakes under stress. Growth assets still belong in the portfolio, but only in amounts that do not threaten sleep or stability. Or, across all stages, the most important principle is alignment. A portfolio succeeds when it matches the investor's reality, not when it matches an abstract model. Many failures occur during transitions, when portfolios lag behind life changes. Regular review tied to life events. Not market events keeps the portfolio relevant. This habit alone prevents many of the most damaging errors. In the end, portfolio management across life stages is about stewardship. Capital is a tool that serves different purposes over time. Treating it with the same strategy forever ignores the one variable that always changes you. Investors who accept this evolve, calmly reduce regret, and allow their portfolios to support each chapter of life rather than fight against it. If this discussion helped you reflect on where you are in your own investment journey, consider subscribing to stay with these long-form conversations, focused on aligning money with life, and leave a comment sharing which life stage feels most challenging for portfolio decisions right now, because clarity begins with honest self-assessment.